So you received an interview notice. I want to reassure you that is not a bad thing at all. Interviews are actually the norm. I know you may have had a friend that had their interview waived, but please know it's perfectly normal to have an interview. And that's actually the purpose of this video. It's to make sure that you feel prepared for when you go to that interview so you can walk in there confidently and none of it will be new or seeing it for the first time. We would have already gone over it in this video. And as a reminder, please make sure that you schedule a time to talk to me directly so that we can prepare you and have a mock interview. So with that said, first things first, we want to make sure that you have your interview notice. The interview notice should have arrived in the mail. We may have attached it in an email for you, but make sure to check down here. Make sure that the day and time works for you both. So for the beneficiary, the person receiving the benefit, and for the petitioner, the person requesting that the beneficiary receive the benefit, like the person vouching for them, whether it is their spouse or their parent, basically just saying, yeah, this person's cool, I can vouch for them, give them a green card. So please make sure that these dates and times work for you, and if they do not, please let us know. Also, check out the address of where the interview is going to be. If it is somewhere just that does not make any sense, it is too many states away, please let us know so we can go ahead and correct that. So with that said, we want to prepare you for your interview. For the interview, very briefly, they are looking into two things, and these two things are going to be our themes throughout. So first and foremost, they are trying to make sure that there is a relationship in good faith. What that means is that it is actually authentic. So let's say if it is a parent and child relationship, that they are actually parent and child, and that relationship existed prior to them turning 18. If it is through marriage, that one is more common to have an interview because there are a lot more examples of marital fraud. So people who only get married for benefits, so only getting married solely for the green card and no other reason. So for those kind of cases, we want to show that they are married in good faith, and to them, to USCIS, marriage is combining their lives together. So with that said, the second thing that they are looking into is making sure that there's nothing that disqualifies a person for that process. That is anything that makes them ineligible, such as criminal records, past immigration violations, threats to national safety or public safety, national security, that sort of thing. So with that said, just keep that in mind because it's going to be important throughout. Now let's go over who can go with you. It's a little too close, right? Okay, so up here in the interview notice, it tells you who can go with you to the interview. If it is based on marriage, both spouses have to attend together. That's the best way for them to see with their own eyes that, yeah, this is a real marriage. If either party does not speak English fluently, you can bring an interpreter with you. The interpreter, that is a whole separate conversation, so please make sure to contact our office. We are more than happy to assist with that process. We can recommend interpreters to you, and a loved one can go, so long as they're not part of this case. They don't really like it when family members attend these interviews as the interpreter, so try to ideally keep it as a professional. A professional interpreter should go with you because that is less risk. There have been some interpreters who hurt the case more than they help the case. And so if you want to hire an interpreter, or if you want to have an interpreter that is a family member, please contact our office first because there are a lot of red flags and it's just a conversation we should have. An attorney can go with you as well. I'm more than happy to go, and if there is another attorney closer to you that can go with you, or you would like for us to find you another attorney that is closer to you, that's perfectly fine as well. I just want you to know that attorneys don't have a lot of power in the room. All we can do is the same thing that you can do, which is, in case of any issues, raise your hand and ask for a supervisor. So, if at any point the officer is being unprofessional, Anything that would not be okay at a job interview, such as yelling or asking questions about your intimate lives, that's not okay in a job interview, and it's certainly not okay when a federal government officer is asking those questions. So, or doing anything of the sort. So, in those kind of cases, you can do the same thing an attorney can do, which is raise your hand and request for a supervisor. Aside from that, attorneys are useful for breaking down complicated legal topics and legal issues and explaining it, making it easier for the officer. So, a lot of cases aren't that difficult or don't need a lot of breaking down for the officer because they see them every day. I please reach out to our office and I can explain to you if it is a more difficult case and generally what to say. But that's the purpose of our interview prep. Now, up next, if this interview is based on parent-child relationship and the child is a minor, the petitioning parent and the child must appear for the interview. So all of this pretty straightforward, right? So that is who can come with you. Up next is the documents to bring, and luckily they already spell it out for you. So here is the list of documents to bring with you to this interview. The most important thing to bring is this interview notice. This is your ticket in the door, this is your ticket to check in, and I'll explain when I explain what the day is going to look like. I will explain where this comes into play. Please also make sure that you and whoever is accompanying you have a government issued ID. Ideally, passports. Passports are perfect, but if they're expired, please make sure to bring anything with your face on it. That comes from the government. Now, medical exams and the affidavit of support, both of those are things that should have been submitted initially with the initial packet that got sent out to USCIS. So don't worry about that. And then from there, just follow the interview notice. Make sure that all of the documents listed here are included, that you have a copy of all of them. And don't worry about it. We will go over each one by one during our interview prep, where we have another call together to make sure you have all your documents ready and we do a practice interview. So please read your interview notice. It already says the documents that you need to bring. Collect them all prior to our interview prep, so that way I make sure that you are good to go. So with that said, let's go over what the day is going to look like. Your interview is going to be over at a USCIS office. I highly recommend Googling the location of the USCIS office prior to even our conversation. So just, that way you're not seeing it for the first time. So you're going to look at your interview notice down there in the bottom corner. You'll see the address. And I just recommend looking it up on Google Maps, looking around the area like, oh, okay, so this is what the place looks like. Oh, okay, I see the parking here, maybe some metered parking over there. And just being familiar with the area. So that way you're not rushing too much. You know what the traffic is like in the area. You generally know where to park, or like plan A or plan B on where to park. I don't recommend parking in parking meters, just because this process can generally take more than the 2 hours that they give you in time. But my recommendation, just be familiar with the area ahead of time. They're not always just buildings dedicated only to USCIS. Sometimes, as you can see here, they are a federal building with a bunch of other immigration agencies. But we'll discuss that during our interview prep together. My recommendation, though, is to make sure that you get there an hour before the interview time. So if we go back to our interview notice, as you can see, they have the time down here. And you want to make sure to get there an hour in advance. So that way, especially in the mornings, in case there is a huge line out the door, you don't have to worry about it too much, or you don't have to be too stressed, because you're going to get there with enough time. You will have to go through security, and the security officers typically let you in 25 minutes prior to your appointment time, but different places have different policies. What is the same throughout is that you will have to go through security. So here you can even kind of see they make you take off your shoes, take off any medals, and they just want to make sure that you don't have any weapons, knives, explosives, drugs, anything you wouldn't bring to a federal government building. First, when you're approaching the officer, they will want to see your interview notice just to make sure that you don't have any just to make sure that you are there at the correct day and the correct time, correct location, and then they let you in through the door. Then you go through the airport like security, put your shoes back on, and then you are off to the location of the interview. For most interviews, they'll tell you like what floor it's in, if it's the first floor, second floor. And when in doubt, just ask someone. They're normally generally pretty helpful. But yeah, you will show them your interview notice. They'll look down there to see if it is the correct day, time, location, and then you are in through the door to your appointment, and then you go to the waiting room. At the waiting room, you are first going to want to check in. So there will be either check-in windows that look like this, where it's a person behind the glass. Sometimes they are just a desk out in the open where it says receptionist check in, but there will be signs letting you know where to check in. But for the most part, most places are behind a window. At this window, the beneficiary, the person who will be receiving the immigration benefit, will have their photo taken. They'll take their fingerprints, and they may have to take their signature. Think of it like a mini biometrics appointment. And first things first, as soon as they approach the window, they will have to show the interview notice once again, not for what's down here, but more so for what's up there, like the barcode. They're going to scan the barcode, and that alerts the officer that the person is here, they are ready for their interview, and all the behind the scenes stuff goes on. While all that behind the scenes stuff is going on back here, as in like someone getting your file, the officer preparing, what you can do is, while in this waiting room, while you are also waiting amongst a bunch of other people, you can start preparing for the questions that you may be asked during this interview. So, as I mentioned before, there are two parts to all of this. There is the I-130 confirming that you are in a good faith relationship, and the I-485 just confirming that there is nothing that makes you ineligible for this process. So you can go over these questions while you are waiting to be called. Of course, we want you to have an interview prep with us, like a mock interview, so that way we make sure that we go over these questions together and that we get to practice together. So if this is a case based on parent-child relationship, not too much to worry about there, because the birth certificate basically already covers that. And if it's an adoption case or you are the step-parent, the marriage certificate and the birth certificates will help cover all of that. So there's not too much to go over for the I-130 stage in parent-based relationships. But in marriage-based cases, we don't know exactly what you'll get asked, but we've done this so many times for so many cases, like countless cases, that we've compiled a list of helpful questions that you may be asked, and we've already sent it to you. It should have been included in the email with this link to the video. And during our interview, we'll pull a lot of the questions from here, but my recommendation is that you and your spouse both go over these questions together and see how you would answer, because there is such a thing as a Stokes interview, where they separate you both and see if your responses to the questions, so if your answers line up. So please make sure to go over this together at least once, just to see how each person would answer, and then go over and fix up any discrepancies. So please make sure to review this. We don't know exactly what kind of questions you'll be asked for the I-130, confirming that the marriage is in good faith part, but we do know exactly the kind of questions you could be asked for the I-485 part, and that is from your I-485 form. So here, generally it falls into two categories. One is just confirming the information on the rest of the packet, like on the rest of the form, confirming how you enter the U.S., where you were born, where you work, where you live, if you still live there, if you've changed addresses since filing, stuff like that. So they'll confirm some of this information, but the most important information here starts on part 9. That is the general eligibility and inadmissibility grounds questions. So basically, just confirming that there is nothing that makes you ineligible or disqualifies you from this process. So for this part, you generally know when it got started, when they are asking you if you've ever been part or in any way involved in any organizations, associations, funds, foundations, parties, clubs, societies, any groups of people anywhere in the US or anywhere throughout the world. That's your, that's how you can know, okay, they got started on the eligibility and inadmissibility questions. In your client document folder, you can see a copy of the file that we submitted, so you can see how we answered. In case there are any changes that have to be made, that's perfectly fine. That's what the interview is for. So if you change your addresses or employers, or you have to change how you answer to one of these questions, that's okay, but generally, we want to make sure we stick to how things are answered here. In case of any differences, we can discuss what is okay for it to be changed and not to be changed. But let's go ahead and discuss, generally some of these questions, because for some of these questions, there are some that you can say yes to and it won't automatically disqualify you because they are already automatically forgiven so long as you're married to a U.S. citizen. Or your petitioner is a U.S. citizen. There are some, however, that will ruin your life. You will be automatically disqualified from any benefits for the rest of your life. So, let's just to go over some of those briefly. If you have ever worked in the United States without authorization, that's perfectly fine. You can answer yes if that happened. Just make sure that the person petitioning you is a U.S. citizen. But yeah, here you don't have to hide it. People get in more trouble trying to hide it rather than just being honest about it. But that's, of course, something we reviewed already before filing. Now, for question 13, if you've ever violated the terms or conditions of your non-immigrant status, that is also something that's automatically forgiven. Overstaying your visa, if that's how you entered, is automatically forgiven. Now, if you've never had non-immigrant status, that's perfectly fine. But if you have questions about these things, please schedule a call with us. This is some of the stuff that we will be preparing ahead of time. And they're going to go over criminal acts and violations. So if you have any criminal record, let's discuss. If you got arrested between filing and the interview, please let me know. And then here, our favorite question is if you've ever committed a crime of any kind, even if you weren't arrested. People love to confess the date of the interview and then didn't tell me ahead of time. So here, if any issues come up or any doubts at all, please let me know so I can help out here. Because all of a sudden, once they are in front of a federal officer, that's when they want to start acting like if it's a confessional. There's going to be questions related like to public safety or national security. Public charge questions, that's a little more complicated, but I do hear they are asking it more lately. But basically, they want to see the size of your household, and your household is categorized by, petitioner, beneficiary, any dependents, so how many children you have or how many dependents you claim on your taxes, stuff like that. We can help you figure out your household size, but whatever we put up here is probably the right answer unless things have changed. And then they're just going to want to confirm this information here, like what you put there, if that's still accurate. The reason for this is that anyone who is applying as a family member or an immediate relative of a U.S. citizen, they automatically are, and this is confusing, and I apologize, you can skip over this section if it confuses you, but they are automatically subject to the public charge ground of inadmissibility. A public charge is someone who is going to be depending primarily on the government for income. So here, the government doesn't want to give a green card to someone who's going to be depending on them for money. So anyone who is getting a green card through a family member is automatically subject to the public charge ground of inadmissibility. That doesn't mean that they are inadmissible because they are subject to it. They're just subject to it, but they're not automatically inadmissible. That's why they have a sponsor, or that's why um, they can prove that they've worked for 40 quarters paying to the Social Security Administration. Basically, this part over here, it's a little confusing. Please don't worry about it too much, and in case of anything, I can explain further. But just know you are likely covered and you are likely good, and we can go over how to respond to these questions in case of anything. But worst case scenario, they're probably just going to go over these questions, just making sure that how you answered was accurate. And then, just so you're aware, the most important thing here is just making sure that number 70 is no. They're going to ask if you've ever falsely claimed to be a U.S. citizen in any way. That is, if you've told an employer that you're a U.S. citizen, or you have it in writing somewhere, or you voted in an election, or you did jury duty. These would automatically disqualify you from being able to from automatically getting any benefits in the future ever. It is one of the gravest sins in immigration law. So, I say this because if this was the case, this is one of the things we screened for, just to make sure, like prior to hiring us. We just want to make sure that this never happened and that there's no record of it if it did. But we can discuss further in case of anything. Just make sure this is no. So, yeah, with that said, these are the I-485 questions. We've already reviewed them once prior to filing, but we can review them together during the mock interview and go over them. And in case you have any doubts, in your client documents folder, you can go over how we answered these and which ones are okay to be changed. Now, with that said, during this part, you are in the waiting room waiting to be called. So while you are waiting up here, go over those questions. And then you are going to want to listen out for the beneficiary's name. So the person receiving the benefit, wait until they get called so you hear their name. Now, what if while you are waiting, one of you is in the restroom? That's perfectly fine. So let's say you get called up, the officer comes out, calls your name, and it's like, beneficiary, you here? One of you will, and if your partner is in the restroom, one of you would go up to the officer and say, oh, good morning or good afternoon. I'm so-and-so, I'm the beneficiary or I'm the petitioner. My spouse or my child is in the restroom. Can you please give us 5 more minutes? And typically the officers are okay with it. They'll give you 5 more minutes. They may roll their eyes a little bit, but they're typically okay with it. And at that point, that's when you run over to the restroom, bang on the door, beg for them to get out as soon as possible, and then once they are out, you're both waiting until you get called. I understand. I also have to go to the restroom before very important events, but just so you know, in case you do, this really isn't one of those times where you want to be wandering around the place. So please do your best not to get lost or wander around the building. But yeah, once you get called, I think that this is informally when the interview starts. It hasn't started officially, but the officer's already watching, already observing, and making judgments. Because you have to remember, the officers are here to look out for any fraud. So, let's say, for example, you two are... let's see, this one might be a good one. Let's look at these people over here. Let's say, for example, you are the officer, you walk out and you see that, these two people, the ones on the first row, they are the couple saying they are married, but while they were waiting for the interview, they were seated a few seats away from each other. That looks a little suspicious. Are they actually married? Why are they sitting away from each other? Or let's say you are the couple, and as soon as you two get called, you're elbowing each other and mad, and as you get up, you elbow one another. That also looks really bad. I don't think a married couple would do that. Now, this isn't to say that you can't be mad at each other during the interview. I would say a good chunk of the couples that go to these interviews are mad at each other during this time. That's perfectly normal. So if you and your partner are mad at one another, that's perfectly normal. It happens. You know, things happen. The officers are used to seeing that. Sometimes couples are overly lovey-dovey, and that's when the officer starts getting really suspicious. But if it's authentic, that's not a problem. It happens. I've been in interviews where the a couple does not let go of one another. They are just clinging on, cuddling the entire, petting each other the entire time. It makes the officer uncomfortable, but that doesn't mean it's not a marriage in good faith. That doesn't mean it's not authentic. So that's okay. It's okay to be overly lovey-dovey. It's okay to be angry at one another as long as it's all authentic. What's not authentic is, you know, people who are acting, who it's the first or second or third time meeting, they're still a little uncomfortable around each other. That is a huge red flag. That's why actors rehearse a tons of times in order to make it come across as natural. So officers can really spot when someone is acting unnaturally. So just be aware. But all of this is to say that, you know, you got called, the officer called you both up. You're going to greet the officer, just good morning or good afternoon, officer. I'm so and so, I'm the beneficiary. I'm so and so, I'm the petitioner. And then you're going to get walked over to the USCIS room. While you are getting walked over to the interview room, you are going to be watched like a hawk. The reason is that it's a secure federal government facility, so there are a lot of confidential and files and information just laying around. They want to make sure you're not stealing anything. They want to make sure that you don't wander off and mess with anything. And, you know, they're also kind of judging a little bit. So they're like, okay, well, are they walking hand in hand? Do they have their rings on? They're already making some assumptions. But for the most part, they're just there to make sure you actually get to the interview room. The interview room is going to look a lot like this up here, where it's just a desk. Oh, let me go ahead and zoom in. Where it's just a desk with the officer on one side and the couple being interviewed on the other. Let's see, sometimes an interpreter or or the attorney will be either in the middle or seated behind the couple being, or the people being interviewed. Like here, this was probably an interpreter, and you know, it's probably an interpreter seated here, then the couple being interviewed and the officer. The officer is going to be behind their desk, you know, on their computer typing. Their systems are usually very slow, so something to keep in mind. And my recommendation is always for, as soon as you're entering, where's a good photo? Well, my recommendation is usually for the petitioner to be seated right next to the wall, and for the beneficiary to be seated directly in front of the officer's line of sight. So that, because the petitioner is only there for the I-130 portion of it. Like, they're going to be in the room throughout, but the petitioner will only be asked questions for the I-130 portion of it, so confirming their merit in good faith. Whereas the beneficiary, the person receiving the benefit, is going to be there for both portions of the interview, the I-130 and the I-485. During the interview, first things first, they are going to have you both hand in your government ID, so ideally your passport. This is to confirm that the person in front of the officer is the actual person that's supposed to be interviewed. They're just confirming identities. And they might hold on to it. Please make sure that you don't leave without your documents. They're super important. And then they're going to put you both under oath, just saying that everything you're going to say is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. You're under oath now, like under the penalty of perjury. If you lie, or anything you say that's inaccurate or, you know, intentionally to lie, could have major consequences down the road. So always tell the truth here, and that's always what we encourage. Please note, we've screened for all of this, but if you have any concerns at all, that's what we're here for. So we will help you out here. With that said, you know, usually the I-130 questions start, so they'll ask you questions about the marriage, and then after those are done, then you'll go straight into all of the I-485 questions, all those yes or no questions. They might still ask, you know, if you still work somewhere, or if you still, you know, have a different address, or confirm your entry details. But for the most part, it's I-130 questions first, I-485 questions, and then the interview is over. After the interview, they'll give you a sheet of paper just letting you know the results. It's been approved on the spot, but just so you know, it is much less likely for an officer to tell you if you've been approved on the spot. They don't do that as much these days. But it's either an approval on the spot, or they need more documents, in which case they'll issue a request for evidence and we'll help you respond to that. Or they issued you a notice of intent to deny, which gives us a chance to respond to that and to be able to correct whatever issue went on. Or it will be a denial, in which case something really, really bad happened, and we'll discuss and we can see if we can appeal or whatever the issue is. But those are the ways the interview could end. Once it's ended, we encourage you to walk straight out back to the parking lot, and out you go. They will walk you out to make sure you don't steal anything, just like we mentioned earlier. So the officer will typically walk you out the door, and then from there, it's a boring government building. There's not a lot to see there. This isn't the time for sightseeing. I recommend just out the door, straight to your car, and just because of, we don't want any negative immigration enforcement, so get out of there as soon as possible. No need to explore. And then text us, give us a call. We are happy to discuss how the interview went with you. We want your feedback. We want to know how it went in case we didn't go with you. But ultimately, we will prepare you for all of this, so please rest assured. That is the purpose of the interview prep. So if you haven't scheduled one with us yet, collect all your documents, and we will treat it as if it is the day of the interview. We are very much looking forward to this. This is a huge milestone. It is a good thing. So in case of anything, reach out to us. We are here to help you prepare so that you feel confident about the whole thing. You got this.